Today, we live in a very diverse world with many different cultures, languages, and ethnic groups. Recently, the term indigenous peoples has become increasingly common in major global discussions surrounding human rights, development, or the climate change, and many other major global issues. And many of you have also asked me on different occasions to explain who exactly are the indigenous peoples. Therefore, this video aims to provide a very basic understanding of the term indigenous peoples, including who they are and how they are recognized at the national and international levels. You may have heard the terms like First Nations, especially in Canada, or Native Americans in the US, or Aboriginals in Australia, Maori in the New Zealand, or other terms such as the Sigil tribe in India, Adivasi Janjatis or indigenous nationalities in Nepal, or the other terms like ethnic minorities or ethnic groups in China, Bangladesh, and so forth. For many years, the term indigenous has become widely used to refer to the original inhabitants of a region. There was an international debate around the meaning of the term indigenous, which began in the late 19th century. The term indigenous actually comes from the Latin word indigene, Indizene, which the Romans actually used to distinguish between the persons who were born in a particular place or the immigrants. Similarly, the Greeks also used similar terms to refer to the group of people who were first to occupy or to reside in a particular place. Therefore, the roots of all these terms share one conceptual element, which is the priority in the time. Who came first, or who were the first resident or inhabitants of the particular territory. Therefore, indigenous peoples are those who have been present in or on a particular land or and the territories long before the modern countries or the borders which were drawn on a map. The fact again is there is no international consensus on the definition of indigenous peoples, as they cannot be precisely identified, nor can any existing definitions be universally applied. So far, one well-accepted definition which has attained considerable respect even within the UN system is the definitions provided by Jose Martinez Cobo from Ecuador, who was appointed as a UN Special Rapporteur to study the discrimination suffered by indigenous peoples in the year 1971. This was considered as one of the first major UN studies of indigenous peoples issues. He spent considerable time clarifying the definition, especially the importance of self-identifications or self-determinations. His final report was submitted to the UN Commissions on the Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minorities only in 1987. In his study, the definition of indigenous peoples basically reads, the indigenous communities, peoples, and the nations are those which have a historical continuity with pre-invasions and pre-colonial societies that developed on their territories. And they consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the societies now prevailing in those territories or parts of them. They form at present non-dominant sectors of the society and are determined to preserve, develop, and transmit to the future generations their ancestral territories, their ethnic identity, as the basis of their continued existence as peoples, in accordance with their own cultural patterns, social institutions, and legal systems. So this definitions was included by Jose Martinez Cobo, as I said earlier, was appointed as the UN Special Rapporteur by the UN Subcommission on Prevention of Discrimination and the Protection of Minorities back in 1971, and he actually had started a study in the year 1972 and submitted the report only in 1987. The UN suggests that it is more helpful to identify people rather than trying to define them when discussing identity. Therefore, self-determination or self-identification is a crucial factor in determining who is considered indigenous and who is not. This basically means that an official definition of indigenous peoples has not yet been adopted by any international bodies, including the United Nations. Instead, these organizations have developed an understanding of what this term basically means, what the term indigenous peoples basically means. The concept of the indigenous peoples, therefore, are considered as those individuals who self-identify as indigenous at the individual level and are accepted and well recognized as the members by their own communities. And they are those who have lived on their lands and territories since time immemorial, or for thousands of years, long before the formation of modern states or the formation of modern governments, or before the arrival of colonial powers. And they are also recognized or acknowledged as a distinct group with their own unique languages, cultures, rituals, traditions, and ways of life. Subsequently, they are the original inhabitants of a particular land or the territories. And therefore, they have a deep and historical connections to their ancestral lands and ancestral territories, especially the forest, rivers, mountains, or the desert, or the ice falls. This connection is not just about the land ownership. It is deeply rooted in their cultures, spiritualities, and the ways of life, all of which are inextricably linked to their lands and the environment. So now I think you might be wondering how many indigenous peoples are there across the world. Well, it's a huge and diverse groups. Globally, there are approximately 476 million indigenous peoples living in more than 90 different countries. That is roughly 6% of the global populations. That's quite significant, isn't it? However, despite being only 6% of the world's populations, indigenous peoples play a crucial role in protecting some of the most important parts of our planet. The manage, or it is considered that they have prerogative rights to about 25% of the world's land surface, and astonishingly about 80% of the world's biodiversity is found within these lands and territories. Their traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge, such as how to care for forests or the rivers, is essential for preserving ecosystems, especially in a world today which is grappling with the climate change. Similarly, approximately 7,000 languages which are spoken globally today, about 4,000 languages are spoken by indigenous peoples itself. In fact, more than half of the world's languages actually come from the indigenous communities. That said, indigenous peoples have faced significant challenges throughout the history. They have endured colonizations, forced displacement from their land and territories in the name of development, and the policies devised by the government aimed at erasing their cultures and the languages. Even today, many indigenous communities very much experience higher rates of the poverty. So that's all for today. Next time, I will explore their interesting issues, history, resilience, and contributions that they have made to the society. Thank you so much for watching. If you have learned something new and would like to learn more about indigenous peoples and their issues or rights or the struggles, please let me know in the comments. See you next time. Bye-bye.